Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marketer Toolbox series, which aim to equip marketers with strategies to conquer modern-day challenges through conversation with industry leaders. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yawa Degwe, and I'm the Demand Gen Marketing Manager here at Vimeo. Today, I will be your host. In this episode titled How to Use Video for Branded Storytelling, we'll be joined by two Vimeo experts, Derick Rhodes, VP of Community and Marketing here at Vimeo, and Katie Halpern, Senior Marketing Manager. They will reveal their secret to using video for compelling branded storytelling. We'll cover proven technique for creating engaging video content that resonate with your audience, strategies to leverage video for powerful brand narrative, best practices from Vimeo top expert to enhance your storytelling skill, and will get invaluable insight into cultivating and nurturing vibrant community that drive sales. But before we dive in, let's go through a couple of things here. We have a Q&A session at the end of this recording. So please feel free to submit any question you have throughout the session. You can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the chat by clicking the blue Ask button. Additionally, you can also vote for questions so we can make sure that they are prioritized. Derick, Katie, before we dive in, I would love to hear a brief introduction from you both. Could you please tell us about yourself and what you do at Vimeo?
For sure. Yeah, I'm Derick Rhodes. I've been at Vimeo for about 7 years now, a little over 7 years, and I look after all things community focused at Vimeo. So that includes our staff picks, on-site curated video program. I also work with analyst relations, so to that community to communicate about Vimeo's products and services. And so, yeah, really happy to be here today. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah. What about you, Katie? Thank you, Derick.
Yeah, thanks, Yawa. I'm Katie. I am a marketer here at Vimeo. I've been with Vimeo also for about 5-6 years. So Derick and I are kind of coming head to head in terms of who's been here the longest. At the moment, I am focused on partner marketing, but I also have a background in being an agency partner marketer. And so I have a lot of experience in working from both the brand perspective as well as the agency side and developing branded stories.
So today we are going to talk about video storytelling. So first, I would like to make sure that we have the same definition and we understand what is it. So what's, in your opinion, define effective video storytelling and why it is important? Derick, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, to be honest, like any type of storytelling really comes back to the emotion of the piece and connecting with people. So, I think for me, the most effective videos and stories and even brand narratives are really the ones that, touch you or hit you in some way that feels personal, that you can relate to, that kind of, reach you on an emotional level. Like for me, I really respond when I feel like something is speaking to me or something about my experience. So I think that's the heart of it. Obviously, there's a lot of techniques and other ways to approach video beyond just the emotional side of it. But for me, that's the kind of core.
Yeah, and I'm happy to tune in here as well and just mention that I think aside from the emotional aspect of the engagement from a brand perspective, we also just generally see video to be one of the most highly engaging marketing tactics overall, regardless of sort of what marketing channel it's used in, whether that be email, general landing pages, social media posts. And in fact, I think an important stat here is that approximately 84% of consumers report that watching a video has persuaded them to purchase a product. So I think that really goes to show just how effective this means of marketing is.
So let's thank you. So first of all, thank you. But now let's be specific. Can you provide example of specific storytelling technique that have been successful for brand or for Vimeo actually? Derick, would you like to start?
Yeah, for sure. I can take that one. So, I mean, one of the things I've seen that's been really interesting is how folks have used new tools to tell stories in a different way. So, one good example of that is there's an agency that we've worked with called Collada in the UK, and they made a video for the Edinburgh Zoo actually using Vimeo's interactive player. And I just thought this was really clever, and it kind of brought a new way of storytelling, a new way of kind of conveying information to this audience. And so essentially with interactive, you can add, hotspots and points of exploration actually in the video itself and click through to those to get kind of different information. And I love how personal this video is because they go behind the scenes with the actual keepers in the zoo in the different areas so that, kids can see, for example, like who the people are behind the welfare of the animals and who are the people kind of running the exhibits. So I thought this one just jumped out at me because one, selfishly, it uses Vimeo technology in a really cool way. And two, it brings brand storytelling to a different space where people can kind of choose their own story and kind of really participate and engage in a way that is, I think, really exciting and interesting for the future.
Great. No, thank you for providing this answer. What about you, Katie? What do you think?
Yeah, I've worked with Colada on a couple of other projects, and I think something that they do, aside from the way that they create the content, but also the way they present it, they will ensure that the piece of content has multiple touch points across different marketing channels, and so they're really making sure that they maximize the viewership in that capacity, and maximizing the reach of the content. So, as we'll discuss, like making sure that content is in as many places as possible, or even just kind of allowing for cut downs to live in different places across your different owned channels is also a great way of further engaging your customers and brand followers.
So you're actually leading to the next question, Katie. I'm very curious about how we can use Vimeo tool to enhance storytelling technique. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Vimeo has a lot of tools that I've seen. I mean, I've used myself, but also a lot of our creators and agency friends have used too. Generally, we do have a lot of editing tools. So you have the ability to create content on Vimeo, to trim content, to host it on different channels. So like really push it out to like social channels, for example. And then furthermore, we have things like review tools that are similar to frame.io in that they enable multiple team members to be able to collaborate on content. And essentially what this does is it kind of reduces the different points of contact or different points or different tools that people need to use in order to execute on a video project. It really streamlines the workflow and allows marketers to operate efficiently and effectively at scale.
Derick, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I found like on a very practical level, like last year we released this one take AI assisted tool set, and the teleprompter on that is like a really good, easy to use, kind of effective way to just be seamless and presenting in a way that on your own is hard to do if you don't have a tool like that. Otherwise, I think like analytics are always really helpful. Like, where do people drop off when they're watching your video? Is that telling you something about what's happening at that moment in the story that you might need to rethink or reconsider? And of course, obviously, you also see like where the video is embedded if it's a video that's being picked up in other locations. But I think just getting that like actual real-time analytic feedback can be really helpful in like understanding if the story is working or not.
Okay. There is another thing that I've heard out there is like there's a debate between long form and short form. What's better, long form content, short form content? So let's settle that. What's your take on this?
I'm happy to open up here. I think this is probably not a satisfactory answer, but it really depends. I think it depends on the objective of your campaign, and it depends on what you're looking to achieve. It depends on the channels that you're promoting on. So for example, you might do a longer form piece of content that lives on maybe a landing page, and then you break it up for different purposes for your marketing content. So one snippet can be, again, something that you would distribute for different channels in like social media marketing, and another snippet can go on another platform. Something that I'd like to call out in terms of like our own short form content internally regarding sort of like B2B marketing, Vimeo has recently won a Webby Award for, and this would be our Generation Vimeo campaign. This is a shorter form piece of content, but we've also kind of expanded it in some ways to have almost like, I think, serialized content or almost like variations of this particular piece of content that live in different formats across our different owned media. And I think that this is a really great example of how you can take maybe even if that other piece of content is still short form, but cut it down to have multiple different use cases and different sites where it lives.
Yeah. Derick, do you have a stake in this
Yeah, I
debate?
mean, I also have a deeply unsatisfying answer, and that's like both are best. You know, like to Katie's point, I think the worst thing is content that's too long when it should have been shorter. I think that's the one where I would say like, you might miss the mark if a video really only needs to be like 3 minutes and you're making one and it's like 8 or 9 minutes, and the point of the video is like stretched out over that time span. Like I would say that's is better. In general, I think our attention spans are shrinking so much that I would default to like short being better, but then there are lots of examples that like defy that. I remember, Apple doing a campaign. Mark Malloy, the director, he's a staff picked director. He did a campaign for them called The Underdogs, which is basically like almost like a television episode length piece that is super captivating. Totally makes sense to be that long. I think it's like 13 minutes long. It has gotten tons of views and attention. So if it's really good and the story is compelling, it can be as long as it needs to be. But I definitely default for brand stuff. I think we tend to go shorter just because people aren't really hanging around unless it's like really captivating.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
for
think
this.
Derick raises, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think Derick raises an interesting point here because something I've also seen, we have a category within Vimeo within our staff picked content that is specifically for branded content. And sometimes we'll see, I mean, it's all short form to an extent, like it's all under 30 minutes or so. But sometimes a bit longer might be in that 15 to 20 minute mark. And I think the ones that are really successful, the content that is maybe beyond the 3 to 5 minute zone that is staff picked branded content, is really telling a story. And I think that it's easier said than done, right? Like there's not a prescriptive way of kind of doing that effectively. But the ones that I've watched and really engaged with, it reads almost as another format of narrative content. Like it's not entirely about just the product. You're invested in the story. And I think if your brand has a story to tell and has the means to do so in more of a narrative content piece, then they're more than welcome to extend that length a bit and kind of make it into more of a narrative piece of content, if you will.
Yeah. No, thank you for talking about that. So I feel like we talk about a couple of things here: authenticity and being like relatable. We talk about emotion. Derick, you talk about that. So the one thing that I'm curious about, as we move to the next section about like creating engaging video content and really making it very tactical for brand and marketer as well. I have a question about like Vimeo's feature actually. How do Vimeo feature help marketer like yourself create and optimize engaging video content? Katie, would you like to start
Hey,
about
Katie,
that?
why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah, I feel that some of it I covered in a bit earlier, but I mean, we have the create tools that make it easier for you to just work like end to end on your campaign within Vimeo. But then another thing I hear from agencies in particular, so oftentimes, brands are working with agencies in order to develop content, is that our video library enables them to stay organized. They can really see, they can divide content across a couple of different brands that they might be working on to ensure that it all stays like separate and organized as they see fit. But then also we enable versioning of videos. So oftentimes videos go through like multiple edits, get multiple rounds of feedback. And so even if you sort of overwrite, let's say, a later version or an earlier version of a piece of content with a later version, you can still see previous iterations. So if you want to go back to something, it's not a real pain to have to kind of dig up that file. Another thing that I know Derick and I have talked about, but I think record is kind of an overlooked feature as well. It's a really great way of like sharing feedback and being able to work asynchronously. Internally, the Vimeo team is global. I'm based in the UK. Derick is in the East Coast. We have some team members on the West Coast. And so that's a really great way of like, rather than sending an email or giving text feedback, to be able to just kind of quickly walk somebody through what you're seeing on your screen and like verbally providing feedback from there. So if you have like multiple mock-ups or you're still working through the finished product, I think that's a really valuable and potentially even overlooked tool within our offering.
Derick, is there anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, some of the basics, some of the basics just jump out at me, like, the embedding features, like the control on Vimeo that you have over who sees what you're doing and where, and how to make that available, I think it's obviously very basic, but it's an area we've always focused on and done really well on with both, creative pros and brands telling stories. Like the level of control that you have over like the embedding settings and how the player looks like in that zone. Like, if you want it to be as minimal as possible and you don't want any distractions, like that's a really important like element of storytelling in itself. And I think, our goal is to get out of the way when Vimeo doesn't need to be in the way, even when you're using our player. So I think it is an important part of the story is how you present it, and that is an area where I think we really excel. And we hear that from creative pros and people that tell stories for brands pretty frequently, is that they really like the security and the control aspect of using Vimeo for that side of things.
Yeah. We talk a lot about brand and marketer as well. I want to dig into leveraging video for brand narrative. So how can brands ensure their video content align with their brand narrative and their values? Derick, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of a tough one because I think there always should be a degree of flexibility, but generally, like most brands, we have our own brand guidelines, and, our really talented copy team, and the writers on our team have established what our voice is and how we come out, how we present ourselves in the world, and the types of language we use. And so I think that is kind of a guideline, at least for us, is we want things to fall within that kind of brand voice. At the same time, it's important to take risks and to allow the creative team to have some freedom and flexibility. So I think trying to figure out where the balance is probably the main challenge for a lot of brands. And, we ourselves kind of grapple with that. Like we have a legacy of being like a little weird and kind of goofy and like adding fun and whimsy to our videos. And I think makes sense for Vimeo. It might not make sense for every brand, depending on what you're doing. Katie, I'm curious if you have like what your take is on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that what Derick has alluded to that I'd like to really hone in on, one of the best pieces of advice I think that I've heard from a brand marketer's perspective is to find your niche. Like your brand is not universally appealing and you have to make peace with that, because in fact, by being too broad, you're probably alienating your truest self or your truest customer really. And so again, Vimeo has this unofficial slogan of stay weird. And if that is your brand, I think honor that. If it's not your brand, also honor that. Like it can come off as quite inauthentic if you try to kind of appeal to as many people as possible, or you try to appeal to something that's inauthentic to what your brand really represents. I think an example of like people who do this or a brand that does this authentically, immediately that comes to mind as somebody who's chronically online is Duolingo. I get their their ads on TikTok, or really, it's not even ads, it's just their content on TikTok all the time. And I think that it's really silly, it's youthful, it pushes boundaries, and I think it takes on this very like Gen Z millennial tone. It's quite sarcastic and sort of flippant while still honoring their brand. And I think that's why it works. Now, for other brands, that might not work to the same degree, but that's not to say that they can't have effective means on TikTok of TikTok marketing. So yeah, I think just like it sounds, again, easier said than done. But really you need to tap into who your core audience is, who your core persona is, and stay true to them. Like, what would they like? And I think it can also vary from channel to channel. I feel like this is opening up a whole nother can of worms, and we might get to this in another question, but like Vimeo, for example, our TikTok content presents a bit differently than content on our website, which is a bit more sort of polished and PMM presented and has like much more kind of marketing language surrounding it, as opposed to our stripped back TikTok content. We have an amazing brand marketer, Aubrey, who does a lot of that. And she just works for our brand, I think. She really is like encapsulating a lot of what we're trying to convey. So yeah, hopefully those examples kind of give everybody a sense of like what exactly to tap into and like not try and force something that doesn't work for your brand.
Oh, no, thank you for this answers. That's perfect. I feel like it really gives us some insight into what to do. So we're coming towards the end of our conversation together. So I want to make sure that people leave with best practices here. So my next question is about like actionable tips and best practice brands can implement to improve their video storytelling. Katie, would you like to follow up on that actually?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, I think a lot of what we just discussed of like really finding what your niche is and being true to that. But then also from a tactical perspective, we've alluded to this earlier, but you have such short time to capture attention. Even if you're making a longer form piece of content, make sure that those first like 3 to 5 seconds are super engaging. I think I see this all the time in like pre-roll ads or even just content that's embedded in other landing pages, emails, whatever. If it doesn't have my attention within kind of, I would say the first like 10 to 30 seconds, really, I'm scrolling away. I'm not going to continue to watch it. So that beginning is so critical to the success of the campaign. I think also from a tactical perspective, don't overwhelm with too many like calls to action if you're making more like brand content that has a specific end goal. I think sometimes we try just naturally to pack too much. I'm somebody who's really verbose, if you couldn't tell. Like I try and pack too much into a really short period of time. And I think we can all do, myself included, with a bit of sort of editing. And sometimes we have to kill our darlings in that process. But I think it makes for better content. And then finally, I think as being somebody who's worked with agencies, if you are a brand that's going to contract an agency to help you produce content, then make sure their vibe aligns with yours. Like, are you both looking to have they produce content that kind of aligns with what you're looking for? Do they work in a way that works for your brand as well? I think sometimes that can be overlooked and it just leads to miscommunications down the line and disappointment. So really make sure that the agency, if you are working with them, aligns with sort of your brand value and statements. But I'll let Derick take the mic. I've been talking for a while.
Those were great. I mean, those were all like really, that makes tons of sense. Like, I think the things I would say would be, like, don't be afraid to experiment with varying quality levels. Like a lot of times brands, we have this idea that like any video needs to be produced at like the production level quality, like super high. And there is definitely a place for that. Like even within Vimeo, if we're doing like a big campaign video, we might partner with like an external production company or a director to come in and kind of elevate the quality of the video. But I think on a day-to-day basis, like it's okay to experiment with videos that are more like stuff made like amongst the team, or working with influencers and folks outside of the company that might be producing more personal content. REI, the brand REI, the outdoor brand, does a really good job of this. Like they will give influencers a budget and they take their gear out into the wilderness, to the outback, wherever they are. And they film content. They make content using their products, but it's like true to the lives of those folks. We had a recent influencer campaign at Vimeo where there's a creator that a bunch of us really loved who does, I would call it like collage style video art. He goes by the name Kyle Makes Short Films on Instagram and TikTok. He has a huge following. His videos are really cool and really clever. And in that case, it was really just like we wanted him to do what he does. And we weren't over prescribing. He had some loose like guidelines, but it was really, we want you to make what you make. And Vimeo's going to be part of that, releasing that content. So I think it's, getting out of your comfort zone a little bit, trying things at a different level with different budgets is always really helpful. And sometimes you'll be surprised like what resonates. And just being, echoing Katie a bit, but just being authentic to your brand. I think that's at the heart of it. And people can feel it if you're, like when brands like awkwardly jump on memes, like on social networks, it's kind of, you feel the pain of it when when they miss the mark. And I think you kind of know for within yourself as a brand, like where that zone is, if that makes sense. So those are, yeah, I think those are helpful, hopefully helpful tips.
Yeah, no, thank you. We talk about video storytelling, how can brand leverage video as well. So we're leading to the last question. One thing that we actually haven't talked about at all, it's about community. How do we cultivate vibrant community? And are there specific strategies or tactics brand can use to build like a strong, loyal community around their video content? Katie, what about you? Would you like to share some more?
Yeah, I think Derick touched on this in the response to the last question, but I think user generated content can really help cultivate a community. It makes people feel like they have an impact and a say on the brand, I think, and they really, I think, value the opportunity to contribute to the overall brand narrative in many cases. I think also another aspect of community that I've seen work is serialized content. And so, whether it's like making various versions of a similar video or kind of having multiple like episodes, if you will, of a piece of content or versions, I think that can help people feel like they are engaging with almost like a TV series or something, and it makes it a bit more engaging, but also I think it can generate a sense of community in that people are kind of like watching it together, like I said, as a piece of almost like non-branded content. Derick, I don't know if you have examples or anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think, for me, a big part of that equation is sort of like meeting community, like meeting people where they are. So, Vimeo over the years has tried to create content that helps to solve problems that the community folks are facing, whether that's on the marketing side, like things like this webinar, or, really practical tutorials of like how to tackle a certain aspect of production or how to approach like making a video. I think showing up in spaces where, the community is active is really important, both like online and in real life. So we do a lot of, engagements at film festivals and places, marketing conferences, places where we know folks that will be interested in Vimeo or use Vimeo are. And honestly, just meeting team members is a really big, important thing. Like I've found that like folks in the community that have some kind of personal connection to the company and kind of know someone at the company, or have met someone and that person was really receptive and friendly at a trade show or at a networking party or wherever, that has a really big impact on, how they perceive their connection to the community and the brand. Kind of funnily enough, I'm going to an event we're hosting tonight around a film festival, and we have like 330 folks showing up for that, and about 15 or so folks from Vimeo that will be there. And that's like one of those moments. It's those people are all in the room. They're getting an impression of the brand. They're engaging and interacting with folks that are interested and want to hear their story. And that kind of resonates like out from there. Like those people will remember that. And their association with the brand kind of lasts longer than we might think sometimes because of those interactions. So I think it's a combination of like really making your content like friendly and approachable and personal and helpful, and also just having people out in the community that, can interact.